Hi, I'm Ramona Werst, and from my Real Texas kitchen, today I am preparing a super treat for you. This is my version of a New England clam chowder, and I'm titling it Real Texas Clam Chowder. Now I know that Texas doesn't have clams, and they came from the East Coast. In fact, these beautiful clams have come to us from Groomer's Seafood in San Antonio. These are actually called an East Coast countneck clam. What makes this a real Texas recipe? Guess what? Jalapenos. That's the twist in my Real Texas clam chowder, is using jalapenos. In a Dutch oven, we're going to add our clams. I have taken these clams and washed them very good so that all of the grit is off of the shell. You don't want any grit on the shell. Added about a ½ inch of water. I've got my temperature on medium. I'm going to cover them and we're going to let them steam for about 10 to 15 minutes. What we're wanting to happen is for the clam to open up so that we can actually get the clam meat out of the clam. Now comes the exciting part. It's been about 10 minutes. We've been steaming our clams, and as you can see, some of the clams are opening. You'll want to go ahead and take the open clams out. I'm just going to go ahead and burn my fingers and do it faster this way. You want to go ahead and make sure you get all of the clams that are opened out and continue steaming the rest of the clams, and then we're going to let these cool. This is really valuable and great juice, and you're going to be saving this for some of our broth. These are the freshest, best tasting clams I've ever had. Very easy to clean, hardly any grit on the shell, and you can purchase these from Groomer's Seafood that is actually located in San Antonio and Austin. They have the best prices and their seafood is so fresh. I'm so pleased with these clams. Look at these beautiful clams. Every single clam opened up. I'm so proud of them. I'm letting those cool just for a moment because I'm going to be taking the clam out of the shell and just saving the clam meat and setting it aside. Remember I told you that this juice is very important for your broth. We're going to strain it. I use a fine screened colander, and then instead of cheesecloth, I go ahead and use gauze 4x4s and just open them up. It's cheaper, they're disposable, and what the heck, it works the same way. I'm going to go ahead and strain this and then reserve the liquid. I'm going to also remove the clams from my shells and set them aside, and then I'll be back for the next step. I've strained the clam juice. The reason you want to strain it is it'll get rid of any little sand that might have been inside the clam, and when he opened up it went into your clam juice. So you want to make sure you strain it, and strain it a couple of times just to make sure that all you have is juice. What I've also done is taken out all of my clams and I've chopped them up. Now I like to have just a little bit bigger chunk of clam in my clam chowder, except I don't want the whole clam. So I cut them in about thirds, and that's about a nice little piece. So I'm going to go ahead and set those aside. I've washed the Dutch oven, and now I am melting the butter. I've added the bacon to the melted butter, and now I'm going to cook it until it's just crispy. We're going to use a slotted spoon to remove it, and then we're going to saute our vegetables in the bacon fat and the butter. The bacon is cooked. I've removed it from the oil, and now I'm going to add my onions. Now you'll notice my onions are actually julienne, and the reason I did that was just to add a little different dimension or texture to my Real Texas clam chowder. So instead of mincing them, I went ahead and cut it in half and then sliced it real thin and separated it. I'm adding my celery. Now I did chop that. I minced the jalapeno. I'm adding my minced garlic. And we're going to saute this until the onion is translucent. All my vegetables have sautéed. I'm now going to make the roux. I'm adding, yes, a full stick of butter. And once that melts, I'm adding my flour. This is going to make a thick paste, kind of like when you're making gravy. My butter is melted. I'm going to add my flour, stirring very quickly now because you don't want it to lump up. You want to make sure it's all mixed. And we're going to cook this just until the flour browns just a little bit. You don't want it burnt, just browned. The flour has browned, and now we'll add our white wine. And you want to add it just a little bit at a time so that your flour doesn't lump up. Add our diced potatoes. Now I like my potatoes a little bit smaller, so I've diced them a little bit smaller. So we'll add in our potatoes. We're going to turn back our heat to medium-low. Cook this just to soften the potato just a little bit. You don't, again, want your roux to burn. Our potatoes have softened just a little bit, and now we're going to add in the strained clam juice. It measured about 4 cups, and we only want about 1.5 cups because we're going to add a 1/2 cup of clam juice. Now this is the all-natural clam juice, and I'm sure that it's just got a little bit more intense clam flavor to it. So we're going to add about a 1/2 cup and add this to our potatoes. Now you really want to stir this because, again, we don't want our flour to lump up. Just like you don't want lumps in your gravy, we don't want lumps in our clam chowder. We're leaving the heat at medium. We're going to now add some fresh cracked black pepper. And this is to your preference. If you like a lot of pepper, then you'll want to add more. If you like a little less, there will be another time for you to season it again. Our fresh thyme. The fresh thyme that I'm using actually came from my greenhouse. And I've got a nice little thyme plant. I just go and clip off some of the thyme, and then I take the stem in one hand and just with my fingernails pull the little leaves off. Very, very simple to do, and it tastes so much better than your dried thyme. You can also, if you don't grow your own thyme, you can, in your produce section, they've got some fresh herbs. I know H-E-B carries fresh herbs. You can get basils, sage, thyme, and some of the other herbs, and you can go ahead and do the same thing as if you grew it yourself. But it's always so much nicer to have your own little herb garden. I'm going to now add my bay leaves. You want to make sure that you know exactly how many bay leaves you put in there. Make sure they're whole because you'll want to find them again so we can remove them. My bay leaves, actually, I grow my own bay leaves in my greenhouse. I have a bay leaf tree, and what I'm doing with this is I'm actually getting it to root. So I have clipped off a piece of my bay leaf tree, and I've put it in water, and it is starting to root. So this is just wonderful. I can give this as a present to someone because bay leaves are very, very expensive. But what you do is you don't just take a fresh bay leaf and put it into any of your recipes. You want to remove the bay leaf, leave it set on your counter for maybe 2 or 3 days until it's an olive green color and it's totally dried out. Then you know you can use your bay leaf. Giving this one more stir, covering. We're going to leave this cooking at a slow simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes or until your potato is tender. So I'll be back and we'll check on our potatoes. You'll want to check on your potatoes frequently to make sure that they're not sticking to the bottom of the pan. And because it is a cast iron skillet, go ahead and turn your heat down to low because it'll continue to cook. And put your lid back on and We'll go ahead and continue to wait until the potatoes are tender. We've been simmering our chowder for approximately 30 minutes and the potatoes are finally tender. Find our bay leaves. Remember I told you you'll want to remove them. And we've got two, well actually we have three little ones. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So we removed our bay leaves. Now we're going to stir in our milk and our heavy cream. Turn the heat up just a little bit. It should be like at medium low because now we're going to bring it back to a simmering boil and then we'll add our clams. So we'll go ahead and let this come to a simmering boil. It'll probably take about 5 minutes to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on just so it'll speed it up just a little bit. You do not want to bring this to a roaring boil because it will then scorch on the bottom and it'll also boil over the edges and it'll make a mess. But the main thing is you don't want to have this scorch on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this and then we'll be back in about 10 minutes. I've brought the chowder to a simmer. Now I'm adding my chopped clams. I'm going to cover it and cook it for 10 to 15 minutes at a slow simmer. You want just the bubbles to be breaking, so you don't want it to actually be a boil. You just want it to be a simmer with bubbles breaking on top. This is going to not only heat up the clams, but finish cooking them too. Yum! Our real Texas clam chowder is finally finished. It smells delicious. Now, if you really want to make it taste a lot richer, you can go ahead and melt 1 more stick of butter in at this time. Now, our New Year's resolution was that we were going to try to lighten up on butter, even though I have found out that butter is really not as bad for you as they say it is. But I'm going to go ahead and skip it this time, and I'm going to go ahead now and serve it up. I'm going to garnish it with the bacon that we had cooked earlier, a little fresh chopped parsley. To finish garnishing, you can add some oyster crackers. No, I didn't make these from scratch, but they're still really good. And there you have it. I'm Ramona Werst, and from my Real Texas Kitchen, this is my Real Texas Clam Chowder.